It was a luxurious first-class flight, and the man sitting comfortably in his seat believed he owned the world. Then, a tall, quiet figure stepped aboard, dressed casually, and took the seat beside him. The man sneered, whispering loud enough for others to hear. First class isn't for everyone. What happened next would leave him speechless and teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. The man was James' sharp suit, polished shoes, and an ego as oversized as his bank account. He thrived on appearances, judging others by what they wore, how they spoke, and where they sat. To him, every stranger was a measure of his own superiority. Sitting in first class, James smirked as passengers walked by, silently ranking them in his mind. But when a towering man in a simple hoodie and basketball shorts entered, James couldn't help himself. "Some people clearly don't know the meaning of class," he muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The stranger, calm and composed, didn't react. He settled into his seat beside James with an air of quiet confidence. But James wasn't done yet. His need to belittle would soon expose not just his ignorance but something far more surprising. James couldn't resist. He leaned closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "First time in first class, huh? Let me guess, lottery win? Or did someone gift you the ticket?" A few passengers nearby turned their heads, sensing the tension. The stranger glanced at James but stayed silent, his expression unreadable. That only fueled James further. "You know, this section isn't just about money, it's about fitting in. And no offense, but you stick out like a sore thumb." He laughed, a sharp, hollow sound meant to draw attention. But the other man's quiet demeanor started to unnerve him. James didn't know it yet, but every word he spoke was digging him deeper into a pit he wouldn't be able to climb out of. And soon, everyone on that flight would see exactly why. The stranger finally turned to James, his voice calm and measured. "You seem to know a lot about first class. Must be irregular." His tone wasn't confrontational, but it carried a weight that silenced James for a moment. James puffed up his chest, sensing an opportunity to assert his dominance. "Of course. It's where I belong. Unlike some people, I worked my way up, earned this spot. You probably wouldn't understand what that feels like." The stranger's lips curved into a faint smile, almost as if James's words amused him. "Interesting. And what do you think it takes to earn respect here?" James, oblivious to the trap he was walking into, shot back. "Success, status, knowing your place in the world. People like me lead the way." "People like you? Well, let's just say you're lucky to be sitting here." Unbeknownst to James, every passenger around them was now paying attention. The stranger's composed demeanor wasn't out of meekness, it was the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. And James was about to discover why. The tension in the cabin thickened as James continued his smug monologue, oblivious to the glances exchanged among the other passengers. "Success isn't just about money," James declared. "It's about knowing people. Connections, power, influence, that's the real currency." The stranger leaned back, his hands resting on the armrest, and asked, "Connections, huh? So you must know some important people then." James smirked, eager to flaunt. "Let's just say I've shared rooms with CEOs, politicians, even celebrities. I doubt you've had that privilege." For the first time, the stranger chuckled softly, a sound so unexpected that it rippled through the cabin. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "Celebrities, huh? What about athletes, say? Basketball players?" James scoffed. "Of course. I've been courtside at the biggest games, met some of the greats." "Why? Do you even follow basketball?" The stranger tilted his head, his smile widening as if he knew a secret James couldn't see. Around them, whispers started to build as passengers began to recognize the man in the hoodie. James, still clueless, continued, Let me guess you're one of those casual fans who think they know the game, but can't name 5 players. At that moment, the flight attendant approached with a wide grin, holding a tray of drinks. "Mr. O'Neill, here's your water. Let me know if you need anything else." James froze, his smirk evaporating. A stunned silence fell over him as the realization hit. But the full weight of what he'd just done was only starting to dawn on him. James's face turned pale as the name sunk in. "O'Neill," he stammered, his eyes darting to the towering man beside him. The other passengers were now openly watching, some even stifling laughter. Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most legendary basketball players in history, smiled and leaned in slightly. "You were saying something about knowing people and earning respect." His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of irony. James struggled to find his voice. I didn't realize. I mean, I wasn't trying to." SHAQ interrupted him gently, his tone firm but composed. "You didn't realize who I was, so you assumed I didn't belong here. Interesting logic. But tell me, what does success look like to you now?" James fumbled for an answer, his confidence shattered. The room seemed to close in around him as the passengers' murmurs grew louder. One leaned over and whispered to another. How could he not recognize SHAQ? SHAQ, still composed, gestured toward the flight attendant. "I think our friend here needs another drink. He seems a little parched." The light-hearted jab drew chuckles from the cabin, breaking the tension. But it wasn't over. SHAQ wasn't just going to let the moment pass. He leaned back and, in a voice that carried through the cabin, said, "Respect isn't about where you sit or how much you make. It's about how you treat people, whether you recognize them or not." James, now visibly embarrassed, tried to shrink into his seat. But the lesson wasn't lost on the other passengers or on him. The man he had belittled turned out to be more than just a legend. He was the embodiment of humility and strength. And that realization was just the beginning. For the rest of the flight, James sat in silence, his arrogance replaced by awkward humility. Every now and then he stole a glance at SHAQ, who seemed completely unbothered, scrolling through his phone and chatting casually with the flight attendants. As the plane began its descent, James finally mustered the courage to speak. "Mr. O'Neill," he started, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you, and that was wrong." SHAQ turned to him, his expression kind but firm. "We all make mistakes, man. What matters is what you learn from them." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. James nodded, his usual bravado gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, genuine humility. When the flight landed, SHAQ stood, towering over everyone as he grabbed his bag. He paused, looked back at James, and said with a grin, "Take care of yourself, and remember, respect always flies first class." As he walked away, James couldn't help but feel the weight of those words. For the first time in years, he questioned the shallow metrics by which he measured others and himself. True success isn't about titles, wealth, or appearances. It's about character, humility, and how we treat those around us. Because in the end, respect is earned, not demanded, and it always reveals the truth about who we really are. Thanks for watching the Justice Twist. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and empowerment, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Together, let's twist the narrative and celebrate justice, one story at a time. See you in the next video.